I was beginning to have faith.
Let's get the obvious out of the way. Season 3 of Euphoria is wildly different from the previous 2 seasons, and people have spoken up. Not a lot of people seem to be liking it. Is the show actually bad now? I wouldn't go so far as to call it bad, but I definitely understand the complaints. This season is flawed, and one of the main thoughts I had when the credits rolled on that final episode was that the whole thing felt very unintentional. I love Euphoria. It's one of my favorite shows. I absolutely adored seasons 1 and 2. I thought they were masterpieces of television. They had incredible performances, breathtaking cinematography, transcendent scores, but above all else, the stories felt intentional. When watching seasons 1 and 2, I was invested because A, they gave us characters that were relatable, entertaining, and fascinating to watch, but also the stories of the episodes unfolded in a way that kept you invested because you could tell they were going somewhere. And the finale of each season brought all of their ideas to a climax and conclusion that felt emotionally satisfying and intentional. But season 3? I really wish I could say the same. When it comes to Euphoria, and especially this season, I know there's been a lot of talk about behind-the-scenes drama. Barbie Ferreira leaving the cast, and of course the passing of Angus Cloud. All things that may have influenced the way Season 3 ultimately turned out, but I'm not here to talk about any of that. The issues with Season 3, as I see them, all stem from the writing at the end of the day. The writing of this season is just so puzzling to me. This season has a lot of interesting ideas, but unlike the first 2 seasons, they don't actually go anywhere. They just kind of exist without any clear direction until they're gone. Case in point, Nate Jacobs. Nate's storyline is the epitome of everything wrong with this season. A lack of intention and a disregard for character. Nate's storyline breaks down like this. We're introduced to him and Cassie living a lavish life in the LA Country Club after taking over his dad's construction business. As it turns out, he's close to $1 million in debt for making some naive decisions with a businessman named Nas. Nas, having some gangster-like tendencies, goes after Nate, attacking and torturing him until he gets his money back. Nate is essentially chased around for the entire season until he loses. He dies. What was the point? That's what all of this has been building towards? That's it? I struggle to find any narrative meaning for that end to him as a character. Do they think that because he was such a despicable character in the previous 2 seasons that this is what we want to see? Is this the karma for all the pain he's caused? If it is, I think it's a really lazy, surface level, and uninteresting way to do it. I felt no depth to this story at all. No intention. And speaking of, where even is that despicable character that he used to be? From the very beginning of the season, he hasn't even felt like the same character. It's like the entire history of Nate Jacobs, the person we've known him to be, has just been blatantly ignored. Like, where is psychotic Nate? Nate used to be one of the most despicable, terrifying, yet fascinating characters in the show, and now he's just a struggling country club businessman. You can't help but wonder, what happened? A big thing to note about this season is that it decides to skip ahead a number of years. Our characters are out of high school now and into early adulthood. Now, on its own, this is a change that I'm not totally opposed to. I don't hold anything against Sam Levinson for making that choice. Franchises evolve. Television series evolve. So I don't think progressing into adulthood was a bad idea, but when you skip ahead as far as they did here, you just miss so much. You can really feel how much time has passed and how much of these characters' stories you missed. With characters like Nate and with Jules. They're just totally different people now. And let's give Sam Levinson the benefit of the doubt. Sure, people change. And maybe he did map out that story. Maybe that history between seasons that caused them to change so drastically does exist. If that's the case, where the hell is it? Let's take a look at Jules, one of my favorite characters from previous seasons who also felt disregarded. Jules has changed a lot, and it really bugs me that we have no idea why. They keep some of her character traits intact, like her passion for art and her sexual tendencies with older men, but she has a whole different personality. Like, what happened? Is there a history that really exists, or did they just use a character we used to know as a backdrop for this kind of adult they wanted to portray? When you're left with a question like that, you can't help but think that whatever chapter in these stories is missing could have made for an actually interesting season of this show. A part of me feels like if Sam Levinson actually worked out Jules' story, if he actually knows how she got here, he would have thought, hey, that's an interesting story. What happened between seasons 2 and 3? That's what I want to know. That's probably an interesting, rich, substantial story, so why not tell it? Maybe it doesn't exist. Maybe he never knew, and just carelessly chucked his characters into a future that has no explanation. And what sucks is that this season actually has some interesting ideas. Take Nate and Cassie, for example. You could look at their situation as a violent wake-up call and a collapse of the American dream. We start the season with the two of them in this glamorous version of adulthood that Cassie has undoubtedly been dreaming of her whole life. A big house, wealth, a loving husband, a family. But all of that comes crashing down as their debt catches up to them, and she and Nate spend the whole season trying to pay off that debt in not-so-glamorous ways. I think that's an interesting idea for a story for them, but I will admit there's quite a bit to be desired from that idea, and it really feels like it could have done with another draft or two. There's another interesting beat that happens at the intersection of Jules and Lexi, where Lexi, as an assistant to a studio director, enlists the help of Jules to do a painting for the set of a network television show, LA Nights. However, Jules' expressionistic psychosexual painting is rejected by the executives, censoring her identity as an artist. After realizing that the mainstream entertainment industry doesn't accept her art, she goes back to her lonely tower, back to being the mistress of a wealthy man where she is free to create whatever she desires, but remains lonely and unappreciated. Again, that's kind of an interesting place for her to be in as a character, but that's about as far as that idea goes. We barely get to see her at all this season. I think there's so much more they could have done with her character and with those ideas, and to have such a brief, bleak arc for her really upset me and left me wanting so much more. There's also some interesting conflict between Lexi and Cassie, when Cassie, in trying to find more ways to make money as a performer, auditions for LA Nights. By some miracle, she gets on the show and has a mental breakdown on camera, and the producers are so enthralled by her emotion that they want to expand on her character. It's here that they task Lexi with writing her character's storyline. She now has an opportunity to finally prove herself in the industry, but at the price of overcoming her contempt for her sister. That's good stuff. That really could have gone somewhere interesting narratively, but that storyline is just suddenly shut down after they decide they don't want a sex worker on their show. It could have gone somewhere, but it didn't. Again, a lot of this just feels so unintentional. It feels like Sam Levinson has these moments where something happens to spark, but he doesn't go anywhere with it because he truly doesn't know where he ultimately wants to go with these stories. The season feels like a first draft that he's yet to go through and pick out what sticks. And there are things that stick. Case in point, Rue Bennett. Rue has the best storyline out of all of these characters, but even then, it's flawed. We start the season finding that her new status quo is as a drug mule for Lori. Makes sense. Season 2 ended with that plotline blowing in the wind and no consequences in sight. But the thing about Rue this season, and probably the strongest idea in the entire season, is her developing interest in religion. More specifically, Christianity. I think this arc really makes sense for Rue. After all she's been through, I think it's only natural for her to start looking for faith in something. The plot ends up getting real thick for Rue, with her starting out as a drug mule, then working for Alamo at a strip club, being caught between these two forces. She then gets busted by the police and works as a double agent for both sides. For her to be in the midst of all this chaos and still try to maintain her faith, I thought was really interesting. This plotline is really suspenseful and is actually done quite well. However, Rue's story ends with her relapsing and dying, which comes out of nowhere. From the beginning, we're told that her journey this season won't be one of addiction, but one of faith. She didn't have any struggles with drugs for the entire season. Her addiction was barely even referenced. It wasn't a plot point at all. And then all of a sudden, it comes out of nowhere in the final hour and takes her life. Maybe that says something about addiction? I don't know, but that moment, our last moments with Rue, could have and should have hit a lot harder if it was in the narrative conversation from the beginning. To know that that's where this was heading this whole time, I'm genuinely upset that the death of Rue didn't carry nearly as much weight as it should have. We've been following this character for 7 years. letting her be the one to guide us through all of these experiences, all of these characters, all of these stories. Her death should have had a season's worth of build-up, a season's worth of dread, a season's worth of faith. Instead, they just pinned it onto the end with no narrative weight behind it. And that sucks. Euphoria is still one of my favorite shows. I'll still look to it for inspiration. I know I will. But it really sucks that now that it's over, I'm left feeling largely disappointed.